Hello YouTube, hi, welcome back. Today we're with another Styropyro video. It was requested that we watch the Demon Circuit video, and this is what came up when I looked it up. Styropyro's video titled "Building a Fire Death Machine Using Soviet Military Tech." If you like if you like content like this, feel free to like, comment, subscribe, and we're gonna jump straight in after I lovingly position myself back in this corner. Is where I belong. Let's
I
go.
recently came across these Tesla arc lighters on eBay, and for how cheap they are, I couldn't help but buy a couple to screw around with.
I love
Tesla arc lighter, is that what I think it is? I've actually never heard of it before this.
electricity and I love fire. So anything that combines the two is definitely going to grab my attention. I mean, seriously, what could be more fun than a device that can burn stuff with an electric plasma? So today I'm going to test these things out and maybe make a few upgrades. So yeah, I hope you enjoy this.
You know, somebody said to me in real life that his hair kind of looks like he's been electrocuted one too many times, and I'm inclined to agree. It looks a little frizzy, it looks silly.
Video. Now before I go on, I should warn you that all the crazy stuff that you're about to see was done completely for educational purposes. I mean, if you were to try any of this stuff at home, you'd probably die. So yeah, please don't try this at home.
Alright, so here's what all came with the package here. So you got some instructions, a USB charging cable, then of course the lighter. I guess there's a little safety switch here in the back. Alright, here goes nothing. Oh.
Ooh, the sound like goes right through my brain. It tickled in a weird way.
Huh, you call that a plasma lighter? Jeez. Yeah, that's basically blasphemous to put Tesla's
I think it looks cool though. It does do what I thought it did. But I think it looks cool. I haven't
name on
seen
something
any
like
different
that.
ones.
Huh, I was expecting something a lot bigger than this. Yeah, this thing is definitely gonna need some upgrades. You know, I probably shouldn't get carried away just yet. Like, I should at least test out its burning capabilities. Can I light some alcohol? Check. How about some paper?
Dude just casually lit his wood table. Dude just casually lit his wood table on fire with alcohol and a Tesla coil, dude.
If I can get that. Check. How about a match? Cool. So it can definitely light things on fire, so that's good.
But even so, I still haven't seen it do anything that a cheap butane lighter can't do. But I guess I haven't tested its electrical properties yet, so maybe something there will impress me.
Can it light LEDs? Okay, that's pretty interesting. I mean, you can't do
Oh, the sound makes my brain hurt.
that with a regular lighter. How about some neon bulbs? Oh, wow, that's actually pretty bright. Neat. Alright, this one's for science. Ow, holy heck, that
Why? Why would you do that to yourself, dude?
hurt. Jeez. Okay, now I'm bored.
Okay, so I'm not that impressed with this thing. I mean, it can light things on fire, I'll give it that. I mean, if it's gonna have the Tesla name on it, I expect it to be able to melt metals, or at least shoot a giant jet of plasma out of it. I mean, Nikola Tesla could have come up with something much more impressive 100 years ago, so it feels kind of disgraceful to settle for something like this. I think it's time for some upgrades.
Let's start with the obvious upgrades. Can it drive an 8-stage Cockcroft-Walton voltage multiplier stack?
The obvious upgrades, yes, the most obvious one to start. Why did we think of that, chat?
Well, I mean, yeah, but it doesn't make the arc that much bigger, so it really isn't worth the trouble. Maybe I can just feed it higher voltage for a bigger arc. Taking it apart shows that it has a 3.7 volt lithium-ion battery inside, so by removing that, I can hook the lighter up directly to a variable power supply and crank up the voltage. Alright, here I have it hooked up to 4.2 volts, which is the equivalent of having a fully charged battery. And... Huh. That's
Nothing.
weird. Why isn't it making
He
an
broke it. Chat, he broke it immediately. That's impressive.
arc? Well, I guess I can just crank up the voltage until it works, right? Okay. Huh. Okay. So it's just literally gonna do nothing.
His circuitry there is smoking before the thing did.
I'm not really sure why that lighter didn't even start up, but I only have one backup, so this time I'll try upgrading the transformers before stepping up the voltage. Well, at least it works, but it's really no different than the original. Let's step up the voltage a bit there. Yeah, the arc's definitely a bit hotter now. I mean, the circuit is drawing more current, but it's still nowhere near impressive. Let's keep on cranking up the voltage and see what happens. Oh, okay, so it's just gonna break
Fried the circuitry again. That's actually really funny.
that easily. Wow.
Alright, so I think my hopes of modding these things were a bit far-fetched. I mean, seriously, even a charged capacitor of this size isn't that exciting.
Huh, that was actually pretty cool.
Okay, so my point is, go big or go home, right? I guess I'm just gonna have to build my own giant one from scratch. But what kind of circuit should I build? I mean, I could always just make a scaled-up version using huge transformers and transistors. Honestly, the cool factor there wouldn't match the lethal factor. I mean, really, this little 2-electrode thing is kinda lame anyway. A Chad plasma lighter would use a single electrode to generate a flame, and just use capacitive coupling to complete the circuit. So what I'm suggesting is a Tesla coil, right? Well, only kinda. What I'm thinking of is a lot more dangerous.
When it comes to high voltage, I tend to choose more archaic methods of power switching when I can. I mean, my biggest Tesla coil uses a frickin' angle grinder to switch the tank circuit, but it does generate some pretty cool results.
Oh, the sound. Oh, probably not the best video to watch with a slight headache. Oh, that's crazy. He uses an angular saw, did he say, to control that? Hold on.
I mean, my biggest Tesla coil uses a frickin' angle grinder to switch the tank circuit, but it does generate some pretty cool results. I advanced
Yeah, angle grinder. That's crazy. I also want to lick the coil.
to the 20th century with my last Tesla coil build. It's based on a vacuum tube, and the device actually does satisfy the single electrode requirement.
Oh.
Unfortunately, it's lacking in the setting fire to things department. I mean, seriously, it takes a while to get third-degree burns from this thing. Now, that being said, tubes are still the easiest way to make a super hot arc using just one electrode. It turns out that at high enough frequencies and powers, you can generate an incredibly hot arc that resembles a real flame. When this is done on purpose, it's usually in a circuit dubbed the high-frequency vacuum tube Tesla coil. Now, I should clarify, this is the name given by hobbyists to a terrifying circuit that only has some characteristics of traditional Tesla coils. Now, I'll get more into what makes this circuit so scary later, but the first red flag is the fact that the first Google result for the general schematic is this cursed thing.
Oh, God.
The thing is, a circuit
It's in Russian.
using a puny 55 watt rated tube isn't going to satisfy my pyromaniac desires, but it at least provides a good starting point. Besides, I already have this awesome piece of Soviet military surplus on hand. This is a GU-5B triode, which is rated for several thousand watts of output power. Naturally, I bought it on eBay, and it looks like this one sat around in a warehouse for the past 38 years. I could only find 2 other people that build an arc lighter from heck using this tube. There's Zilly Poper, whose videos actually scare me, and Teslista 555, who makes
Wait.
an awesome high voltage.
Wait. Backtrack. Was that dude Why are you doing this on a couch, my guy? What are you doing? What the fuck? Yeah, that's scary. I don't blame Styropyro for being scared for that one. And hi, Jax. Welcome in.
Whose videos actually scare me, and Teslista 555, who makes some awesome high voltage contraptions as well. They both have
But yeah, the tinfoil hat's gonna keep him real fucking safe, Baka.
excellent channels with great high voltage content, so you should definitely check them out. Their builds provided a great reference for mine. I started the build by making a filament supply for the tube. I got a good deal on this toroidal transformer on eBay, and I clipped off a few of the windings to match the proper filament voltage under load. I also added a soft start to the circuit using some relays and big resistors. For the resonator coil, I wound some copper tubing on cardboard pipe. I used cardboard here because PVC and pretty much any other material available in pipe form would cause high dielectric losses. Now, actually powering this circuit turned out to be a lot harder than it should have
Is the cardboard igniting not a concern here?
been. As you've seen on my channel before, I tend to accumulate a lot of old microwave ovens.
This dude's backyard just has to look like a graveyard for microwaves. I don't think I have seen a single fucking Styropyro video yet where he hasn't destroyed at least a singular microwave.
For this special occasion, I decided to use the 2 biggest microwave transformers that I had salvaged during these past couple years. I threw them in an ammo can, encased them in wax, and added some nice standoff insulators on top. And if that wasn't enough, I used this supply to drive a huge voltage doubler. For the caps I used these chonky things, and for the HV diode I used a bunch of lower voltage diodes potted in wax in a PVC casing, and then threw a couple doorknob caps across those for good measure. As a side note, I can't break out microwave transformers on this channel without pointing out how incredibly lethal they are. They kill more electronics hobbyists than any other component, no joke. That being said, even as terrifying and lethal as this power supply is, it just couldn't hack powering my cursed arc lighter circuit. The voltage just sagged too much under load. At this point, I would have just went out and bought some more thrift shop microwaves to cobble together a bigger supply, but
Wait, yeah, Jacob, you got your confirmation. He does raid Goodwills for microwaves.
can't do that this year. So I turned to my shining light in the darkness, eBay. With a bit of searching, I came across a great deal on this huge transformer salvaged out of a flashlamp pumped laser. The transformer was a great fit, but it didn't solve all the circuit's issues. Now, not all the issues were bad per se, but you know what? Let me just show you how it runs.
Oh, the sound. The sound is crazy.
Ah yes, there's that angry hot plasma that my puny little arc lighters couldn't give me. Now remember, I'm not feeding any gas in there. That crazy flame arc is just the air being ripped apart by the electromagnetic field. Now to be fair, the flame didn't look like this when I first powered up the circuit. It turns out that coming up with an electrode that can withstand these conditions is pretty difficult. On normal Tesla coils, a breakout point in the form of a piece of copper wire is often added to control where the arc is directed. When I tried that with this overclocked pseudo-Tesla coil, it didn't exactly work as intended.
Yeah,
That's
I
right.
don't like that that's pointed directly at where his camera is sitting.
Right, it melts copper wire like wax. Now this
Oh, I didn't even realize it was melting the copper. Hold on.
That's right.
Oh, yeah.
It melts copper wire like wax. Now this is pretty crazy because not only does copper have a melting point of over 1,000 degrees Celsius, but most of the output power is actually going into the air around it, not the metal. So how about a steel electrode? The melting point of that is a few hundred degrees higher than copper, so it should be a better fit, right?
No.
Not quite. It turns out it burns like a fuse when hooked up to the output of the resonator coil.
It looks like a fucking sparkler. That's really cool.
Steel is a pretty good conductor in low-frequency circuits, but its relatively high magnetic permeability means that its apparent resistance due to the skin effect becomes pretty significant at high frequencies. This means that it absorbs quite a bit more energy from the circuit than the copper did, and this is pretty apparent as the steel melts a lot easier, even though it has a higher melting point. Now, I can't say I've ran into the issue of liquefying copper and steel electrodes before, so coming up with a durable electrode turned out to be quite a challenge. But then, I had an idea. I know it's puny, but that filament is made out of tungsten, which has the highest melting point of the metallic elements. If that high melting point can at least slow down how fast I burn through electrodes, it'll be pretty useful to me.
There's something about the itty bitty tiny little filament on top of this big ass fucking wire. Is something about that's so funny to me. I don't know why.
Well, I guess it can.
I think it melted, chat. Yep.
Well, I guess it can't. At least we know that that plasma can get over 3,400 degrees Celsius, which is pretty awesome in its own right. But still though, I need a way to not burn through electrodes every 10 seconds. Now there's only one other element on the periodic table that has a higher melting point than tungsten, and that's good old-fashioned carbon. It turns out that my favorite element is available inside lantern batteries in the form of graphite rods. By opening it carefully, I can see the 4 individual cells that make up the overall battery. Each one of the cells has a graphite rod, and these should be able to handle the extreme conditions on my plasma generator. Plus, all that manganese dioxide in there will be useful for other reasons.
I've never seen anybody just casually rip apart a big-ass battery with a hacksaw. I think that's a first for me. And hi, Pickle, welcome in.
To top it off...
No, it was a machete. It was a machete and a hacksaw, wasn't it? I don't know. I'm saying words.
The rods fit conveniently snug inside some 3/8-inch copper tubing. And since graphite is so soft, it's easy to grind the ends into nice breakout points for the plasma. So without further ado, let's see how these hold up. It looks like graphite is a clear winner. Some of the carbon is still vaporized, but it's slow enough to not be a huge deal. But now that I have an electrode that won't turn into a puddle means that I'm ready to spice things up a bit. That's right, I'm breaking out the chemicals. With the help of various metal salts, I can not only make the arc longer, but I can also make it produce some crazy colors. Now adding salts to the running coil would be risky to say the least, but by drilling a small basin in the graphite electrodes, I can pack them with chemicals and deliver salts to the flame that way. I also found it helps to paint the area around it with a saturated solution of the compound. This electrode is loaded with sodium bicarbonate, aka regular old baking soda.
Oh, pretty. That's a really nice yellow, chat. I like it.
The sodium is what gives the plasma that brilliant yellow color, but it also helps increase the flame size. My reasoning for this, at least, is since sodium doesn't mind losing an electron, I'd expect it to hang around in an ionized state, and that would increase the free charged particle density in the outer regions of the plasma. This would help keep the escaping gas conductive for a longer time while it cools, and it would also provide a seed for avalanche ionization of the air around it. Alright, sodium was fun, so how about we try the element above it?
Oh, that's really cool, chat. That's really cool. I like that magenta, that pinkish.
It turns out lithium gives an incredibly deep red plasma on the generator. Now this isn't that much of a surprise considering it gives the best red flames of any element that I've burned at least.
Red? I mean, I guess it could pass for red. I see it as more of like a magenta.
Unfortunately, most lithium salts are highly hygroscopic, so that's why you don't typically see them used in fireworks. Next, I tried an electrode loaded with copper 2 chloride. I can't say I'm that impressed with this one. I was hoping for a deeper green or deeper blue than that.
There's a little bit of green. There's a little bit of green, but it just mostly looks the same to me.
I think the arc is just too hot and the color is getting washed out by blackbody radiation. At the minimum though, it does give a bit more color to the plasma than a bare copper electrode. Now there were a few other disappointing electrodes that I tried, but I'm just going to skip to my favorite one, an electrode loaded with cesium chloride. Now the colors here aren't that crazy, but it does give the biggest increase in flame size of all the salts that I tried. Since cesium is the least electronegative element on the periodic table, it's surprisingly stable floating around as a singly charged positive ion. Like the sodium salts, it provides free charges to increase the plasma size, but cesium does an even better job at it. I wouldn't have thought to use cesium if it weren't for Justin Atkin of the Thought Emporium telling me about cesium lightning rockets. It turns out that an alternative to using tethered wire for rocket-triggered lightning is cesium-spiked rocket fuel. The long hang time of the ions can provide an adequate conductive path to trigger lightning in a thunderstorm. Apparently, if it works for lightning, it also works for this plasma generator. I do look forward to the day when I can try this with actual lightning, though. The last salty...
What do you mean you want to try it with actual lightning? That's crazy. I would also like to cook a marshmallow on it. It looks like it would toast a marshmallow perfectly.
The electrode that I tried used a roughly 50-50 mix of cesium and lithium chlorides. This was a good trade-off between arc length and color, as the arc was nearly as long as from the cesium salts alone, but with a strong red hue from the lithium. Everything I've put on this coil so far has been endothermic for the most part. That means that the chemicals absorbed energy by going into the plasma. But the thing is, I'm surrounded by all this reactive oxygen. It would be a shame letting that all go to waste. And since fire is conductive, my thinking is that I should get some really interesting results if I use flammable conductive electrodes. For the first angry electrode, let's start with magnesium. When magnesium is burned the normal way, it produces a blindingly bright white flame, and this is a pretty classic chemistry demo. So what happens when it's ran on the incinerator coil?
Oh, it's gone.
That's weird. Why is it making every color there is? Like seriously, this thing's switching between red, green, orange, white, and sometimes all of them at once. I have no explanation for this. Now the red's the most crazy to me because it's so deep. I've never seen magnesium produce these colors before. In fact, I'd be
That's actually crazy cool, though. I from what I've seen from his videos, this is probably my favorite demonstration of how shit burns.
really curious to hear input from my viewers on this. Since I had such crazy results with the first electrode, I made another magnesium electrode, but with a lot more pieces of ribbon this time.
Yo, that looks sick as shit, though. That's cool as fuck. Ooh.
This configuration didn't produce that striking red color like before, but instead, this one made a bunch more violet and green plasma. Now these colors weren't nearly as vivid as the red was, but either way it's still pretty awesome because it's considerably different than the typical white flame. I had a smooth brain moment in one of my magnesium tests and forgot to move the ribbon away from the coil, and this actually ended up shorting out the coil a few times.
Yo, dude, just kill it. Honestly, just kill it. Don't let it keep dripping into the coil.
Now you have to admit, it looks pretty cool, but it's probably not good for my tube. For the next metal electrode, I used some zinc that I salvaged from the batteries I took apart earlier. Now this one wasn't as wild as the last one, but it did produce some nice blue colors as it burned on the coil. In my experience,
Ooh.
zinc tends to burn green in most pyrotechnic mixes, so the
That blue is really pretty.
blue color was a bit of a surprise. I tried an electrode made out of ferrocerium, which is the alloy used in modern lighter flints. Now this one was surprisingly tame. I was honestly hoping it would explode or something. Now it did manage to create an incredibly bright white plasma, the brightest out of all the electrodes I tried actually. The steel wool electrode turned out to be one of my favorites. Even at relatively low input voltages,
Yo, now that's the forbidden sparkler, chat. This is the forbidden sparkler.
the steel wool ignites super easily and makes a nice shower of sparks.
Kinda sounds like popcorn.
Now it stops igniting reliably once the outer wool burns off, but luckily, that can just be fixed by raising the voltage.
It got a second wind, chat.
Now I know what you're thinking. Is there anything useful you can do with this circuit? I mean, if you didn't know any better, you might think that this is all just a dangerous and complicated way of starting a fire.
For starters, it's great at driving incandescent bulbs. That's right, why use two wires connected to mains when you can use this awesome single electrode light bulb driver?
Is it gonna explode?
At first, the circuit doesn't draw much power and
I was kind of hoping the light bulb would explode.
just ionizes the gas inside of the bulb. But as it heats up, the melting glass becomes conductive enough to draw more power and really start to glow. I find that 60 Hz hum coming from the voltage doubler to be really soothing. What a great use for vacuum tube technology. Plus, when the bulb reaches end of life, you're left with all these awesome glass beads. This can drive a lot more than just incandescent lights. In fact, a plasma globe lights up super easily on the coil.
Oh.
Since the operating frequency is nearly
That looks dope as fuck.
1,000 times higher than a stock globe, the plasma takes on some unusual forms compared to how they typically operate. Cranking up the power makes it much brighter as well. Unfortunately, the inner electrode on this one quickly melted through, which is why the plasma is turning yellow here. But even as the globe starts to take on air, it makes some absolutely stunning patterns that are totally worth the short-lived nature of the device. Oh shoot! I need to charge my phone, but I forgot to bring one of Apple's proprietary connectors to my shop today. Maybe I can just wirelessly charge it with a coil. Maybe I didn't give it enough power there. Let's give that another go. Huh, don't worry about
Something about the explosion jump scared me.
That was just the voltage doubler arcing over. Well, it doesn't seem to have charged the phone, but it did take care of the problem. Alright, one more test for the coil. Can it cook an onion? One way to find out.
I would say yeah, that could I would assume I would be safe to assume that it can cook an onion.
I'll take that as a yes. Man, this project has been so much fun. Like seriously, this is my spirit circuit. It's sketchy, chaotic, and great at lighting things on fire. Now it's also extremely dangerous.
It might be hidden behind chat, but chat. There's like a fucking burned hole in his wall. Hold on, I'm gonna turn off chat so you guys can see it. There's a burned hole in his wall. Anyway, I'm paused.
Even in the context of Tesla coils, which is definitely saying something. Now it turns out that there's actually very little info on this circuit online, so I wanted to go over some of the key details for those that are interested. First off, I want to compare this to a traditional vacuum tube Tesla coil. Superficially, they both look pretty similar. Both circuits use a vacuum tube that drives a resonant circuit to make plasma, and they use many of the same parts in their construction. That's about where the similarities end though. The most obvious difference is in the choice of coils. A traditional Tesla coil uses 2 or even sometimes 3 coils in the design. The output coil usually consists of around 1,000 turns of relatively fine wire, and usually a metal topload of some sort. Now this circuit only needs a single coil to operate, and my coil here only has 20 turns. Unfortunately, using one coil means that you lose isolation. In the traditional design, the output coil is not directly connected to the rest of the circuit, and instead it's coupled to it via electromagnetic fields. This isolation is part of the reason why I can touch the arc and not instantly die. Oh wow, it tickles. Now I definitely don't recommend that you try this, but it does demonstrate some interesting properties of the circuit. Another major factor is that by touching the arc, I introduce quite a bit of capacitance into the circuit, and this causes the resonant frequency of the output coil to drop. This knocks the circuit out of tune and dramatically decreases the amount of energy the circuit can deliver. That brings up the most important difference between the circuits. If you touch that arc, you die. The output coil here is hooked directly to the high voltage power supply. That means that the circuit doesn't have to be producing plasma or even oscillating to kill you. If you touch the coil while the power supply is live, you're a corpse before you hit the floor. If the risk of instant death syndrome wasn't enough, you also have to consider the potential for RF emissions from the device. This circuit oscillates at a much higher frequency.
Alright, chat. We can't roast a marshmallow on it. That's all I'm learning right now.
Than a typical Tesla coil. Over 10 megahertz actually. Considering the circuit is drawing over 5,000 watts at max power, there's the serious potential for causing RF interference. Now this circuit is a terribly efficient radiator as the vast majority of the energy goes into the plasma, but it doesn't take much EM radiation to become a problem. I don't know if you noticed, but I upgraded my Faraday cage specifically for this project. I covered every surface with fine mesh copper and then painstakingly soldered the seams together. I spent more time building this stupid cage than the actual plasma generator. It certainly beats angering the FCC though, or even worse, local hams. Interestingly, when the circuit is first fired, the breakout actually looks quite similar to a Tesla coil, but this initial plasma channel is quickly heated by the large amount of RF current that goes through it. As this happens, the arc starts to take on more thermal characteristics, and convection draws it upward, giving it a more
Sorry, pause. Jacob, I don't think you'd be fine. You are not built different.
like appearance. Now, if you're wondering how the circuit actually works, it isn't super straightforward. Now, my understanding is that it operates as a Class E oscillator, and the chaotic plasma is the load. Now, this is actually super complicated to model, and that's why optimizing a circuit like this comes down to just trial and error. Now, I'm not kidding when I say that there's little info on this circuit online. In fact, when I first learned about the circuit, the few builds that I could find were all from people in Eastern Europe, and I just assumed this was because they had access to cheap Soviet vacuum tubes. But then I watched Viduli's video on the phenomenon.
But actually, I have a little bit of confusion here because I haven't found a proper English name for this discharge.
I guess I was just searching in the wrong language. According to Viduli, this phenomenon is well documented in the Russian language, and the first paper on the effect was written way back in 1928 by a Soviet scientist. Interestingly, he also found footage from slightly earlier showing Americans that build an RF torch of their own. Now, even though Americans may have been the first to demonstrate the effect, there's very little info on it in English. Now I can go on and on about other weird and problematic properties of the device, like sketchy methods of igniting the plasma, or how changing the electrode can double the power draw, or how in the course of a minute it turns the atmosphere of my shop into literal poison. But at this point this video is already my longest yet, so I should just pull the plug before I get carried away. Now before I end this video, I want to thank the YouTubers that inspired this project, because I'll be honest, I wouldn't have known how to go about building this crazy circuit if I didn't have their builds as reference. As far as I know, Styropyro was the first person to build the torch circuit using the GU5B triode. It's
This
funny
dude-
because
This dude is just straight up got this bitch in a regular ass bedroom.
Popper was the first person to build the torch circuit using the GU5B triode. It's funny because I tried building the circuit as close to what I could make out from his videos, but I couldn't get it to work with his values of grid caps. It's probably just because my brain is too smooth to comprehend his RF wizardry. Tezlista 555's build is what inspired my use of a voltage doubler on the drive supply for a more chaotic flame, and his salted electrodes are what gave me the idea to put half the periodic table in my coil. I wish I would have used his clever coil design though, because it looks way nicer than the one I wound on cardboard. Finally, I want to thank Viduli for sharing some of the history on this type of device, as well as for his previous designs I've used in my videos. This guy is legit. He actually researches in a facility that studies huge pulsed power systems. If you guys are interested in high voltage, be sure to check these channels out. They've got a ton of awesome content and they're certainly more qualified than I am to build this stuff. Well, I guess that's about it for this video. So until the next time, stay safe and happy blazing.
Yay! Thank you guys for joining me. I hope you had a wonderful time, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.